Hey, I'm Brad from Hi-Fi Side on Instagram. Today I'm going to show you how to rebuild a subwoofer for under $30. My local car audio shop lets me go dumpster diving, and that way I can get the baskets and the magnets, and then I go on to eBay. I go onto LordofBass.com. They have a lot of magnets. They have subwoofer cones. They have dust caps, voice coils, glues. I mean, anything you can think of to rebuild a subwoofer. I also go on to Speaker Exchange if you want to do more pro audio type subwoofer. They have a lot different style of coils and a lot different types of cones. But today I'm just going to show you what you're going to need here, and then we'll get into the video and show you how to rebuild one. First, you will need a micrometer. I use a digital one, and it's plastic. That way it doesn't stick to the magnet when you're trying to do something. You'll need a paint marker, need scissors, need some masking tape, we'll use rubber glue. You can also use E6000, I think it's called. It kind of makes a mess, so I don't use it. But this you can also get from Lord of Bass. We got CA glue, and we got the activator. And I use the toughened CA glue from Lord of Bass. So everything I'm gonna do here is, I found it either on eBay, which the cone is off of eBay. It's from Speaker Guy 2002, I think is what he calls himself. He's got all kinds of just different style cones, and there's another cone. It's got a rubber surround. This is the one I wanted to use, but the depth was not deep enough for me to catch the coil. So, voice coils. They make all kinds of sizes. Got dust caps. We're going to use two different ones. We're actually going to use a dust cap that will be the actual dust cap, and then to me this is just a beauty dust cap. Spiders, I'm using a 0.3 by 50, which is kind of average. They make all different sizes, different compliances. Some with leads that are already on them, some with not. These cones already had the holes in them, so we're just going to use the holes and poke the wires out through there. You're going to need some type of I use a turntable. Basically it's two pieces of MDF with a bolt through it. It's got a washer down the center. That way it spins. You can also use just a Lazy Susan that you would put spices on or something at home. That way when you're gluing it, you can turn the subwoofer and glue it at the same time. These are probably this is my, I think with these 6 that we're gonna build, it'll be my 44th subwoofer that I've built. The reason I know that is because I data log everything that I do. That way if I ever wanna build something to a certain spec, I have that weight, the cones that I used, the voice coil I used, and where I got it from. And everything that I'll be using here today, I will leave at the bottom in the description. Also, I will show you in the video that I made a fake coil. That way we can find the depth of the coil that we're gonna need, especially when we're just randomly shopping on the internet. We don't know heights of anything, so I'll show you a little bit how to find a certain height for your cone and for how long your former needs to be so you can catch the cone. Otherwise, I think that's it. We'll get on with the video. So, all right, to give you a little close-up on what we'll be building, this is a Rockford Fosgate P1. It's a newer series. It's not a beefy woofer by any means, but for $30 I think we'll rebuild them. So let's get started. And this is what it looks like after it's cleaned up. Cleaned off all the glue as best I could. Some of it's pretty sticky. In here I didn't grind all of the, I ground it nice and flat and smooth, so our spider will sit nice and flush on there. And then I have this taped off so I don't get no junk inside my gap here. First thing we're going to show you is, if you don't know any heights to cones or how long the former needs to be, we're going to show you some of that. Basically how I found the height for these cones that are just off of eBay. The dust caps that I told you earlier that are from the Lord of Base. Cone. So we're just going to put our shim in there. Basically, if you go online and you find a coil that fits in your gap as far as width, coil length that you think you should have, as far as you know, the depth of the bottom plate and how much excursion. So what I did is basically made a dummy. If I would have found this on the internet and said, hey, that seems like that would work, I made a dummy one. So this is the winding width here. This is the former height to the top of that. And that way I could go back on the internet and I could try to find a cone that will fit from here to the top of my former. Otherwise, you don't really know heights that much until you actually buy all the equipment, and then that gets kind of spendy. So we're going to put that in there to, basically it reaches our, and I already marked out because I know what my top plate is here. That's 0.35. My coil width is 1 inch. So I marked this out to 0.67 from the bottom of the coil. That's where our coil would sit if we bought these coils and we didn't know what we were buying yet. Take a measuring tool. I just use a paint stick. It's flat enough. Then we grab a tape measure. And we're going to measure it down to the top of this coil, which is 2 5/8. And that's basically how they'll measure the cone. They'll measure the cone from the bottom of this to the bottom of that. So you just put it on the table like that, and you can measure that as long as you got no droop in the surround. This comes out to be just right around 2 7/16. Okay. And then if you would need to measure anything for your spider to know how much throw you have to the bottom, so you don't go crazy and buy some huge humped surround and your spider is never going to be able to move that far. So you always want to make sure that your surround is the same as your spider in movement. So that's just some easy ways to find how high the cone is. And most of the cones that I find on eBay or Lord of Base or anything like that, they all have cone height. And that's from every one I've gotten. I've got probably 100 and some cones. That's how they're all measured. All right, we'll get started on mounting things in here. Okay, now that we are ready to mount our coil in, basically for the gap, I've already unsoldered the leads that were here. That way they're nice and cleaned up, so when we get the cone on there, we can put our leads in and solder them, and that we don't have to try getting that junk out of there. I'm going to show you how I clean the coil gap. Just take a piece of tape, fold it this way, and then I fold it that way, and I slide it down in there, kind of saw it. Just in case there's any metal shavings down in there. You can see you don't look like much of metal shavings, but that's it. Okay, then we got our shims in there. We got to make sure we got them placed so they overlap where we need them. And here I'm just using paper. These coils came out to be basically exactly what I needed with some paper. So otherwise plastic is the way to go. Plastic helps when you're gluing, because paper will stick if you glue it, and it'll stick to the paper, then you got to rip it out. The plastic will give up what it needs. So make sure that's down in there, hitting the bottom. We don't want to smash it in there, otherwise it'll smash the paper, and then our height is going to be all goofed up. So I already went through and I made the marks on where the mark needs to be on my top plate. So basically I have a 1-inch coil winding width, which is the width of the coil height. And then I have a 0.35 on the top plate. So I take half of the top plate, half of the coil, add those together, and then that gives me the height from the bottom of the coil, which is 0.67. Get my light out. And I set that to the top of the coil. Or the top of the top plate, sorry. And there's a little mark in there, and I'll show you a picture of what I mean. Okay, now that you got your coil height set, I'm gonna put that on there and get some masking tape out. We're gonna tape the coil to the shim. Make sure it's on there firm. Okay, got our lead set out. It's firm. Height is there. Get our spider. Spider I chose for these is a 0.3 mm by 50 grams. Tuck these in here. Just think I'm gonna. Okay. I'm gonna tap that down in there. Then we're gonna look, make sure our spider looks nice and flat, and it ain't all goofied. And it looks pretty good. So, pre-spray it with activator, CA glue activator. Get CA glue out. Make sure it goes. I'm just going to put a couple dabs on it here. Well, maybe 4. Okay, we're going to turn our fan on. We're going to let that dry for about 3 or 4 minutes. Then we're going to come back and glue all that. Glue the spider to the coil using CA glue. Hopefully I can kind of do this and show you at the same time. So you want to make sure you get it on the coil and it will run down onto the spider. Clean the tip off. Turn our fan back on. All right. I'm gonna flip the whole thing over and glue the other side. Out. We'll flip it over. Use this to make sure our shim gets in that pull piece. Hopefully. And that's just so we can turn it. CA glue again. Just gonna lay a bead across here. Getting the air bubbles out. There. Looks like a pretty good bead. Keep the tip clean. We'll turn our fan on. Give it about. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes. If you look at my glue, That's from using the activator. It kind of really hardens it really fast. If you want it to be smooth and shiny, don't use no activator. It's going to take a lot longer to make. That's how you do that. Okay. Make sure our shim's okay before we put some glue around the edge. Yep, should be fine. I'm going to set that off to the side. Because I will be running my finger around the edge and I don't want to get CA glue all over. So I put just a little bit around this and I keep it to the inside edge as much as possible. Because we'll come around and put another bead of glue around the outside once we get it mounted in here. Okay, make sure our terminals are where they need to be before we slide it down there. I run my finger around there so I can see this getting wet along the edges. That means it's soaked through the them back in there so they're not in our way again. And you could use them round clamps like I showed you in the beginning of the video and clamp it and do all that. I don't do that. Spray some activator. And just push it down. Turn our fan on. Okay. So we're going to put a beader on the edge. And you could use the rubber glue too, because the CA glue's already mounted it down. They make a water-based glue too that works really good for spiders. It doesn't dry as fast, but it does work good. And if you blow on it, it kind of levels it out. Oof. Yep, I'm just gonna leave the fan on it for about 10 minutes and that'll be dry because we already put activator underneath it, so it's gonna grab onto all that and dry it. All right, we're gonna glue the cone down. Should be all set. You can see here, this cone comes with holes poked in it, so I'm gonna use them. Otherwise, I usually sew my leads down to my spider, and I would do that before once I glue the coil to the spider, I would come along and sew the leads out and prop them up. But we're going to use the holes that are in it, and I marked it out here so I'm not steering blind. I know that it needs to be on this cog here, so just make sure things are clean. always have them facing to me. We're going to do this rather quick. Facing the cogs to me, lining the holes up, dropping that down and moving it to center. I'm trying to find center here. Make sure it's centered in there. We're good. Now, usually I would use a ring and clamp the ring down, but this has a beauty ring that we're going to put on it anyway. We're going to glue that all the way around. Just make sure I don't get no glue on my glove and get it all over the surround. Just pressing it down as I go around. Making sure that it's staying center. And it is. Oh, my glove got stick. Okay. Like I said, we will come along, we'll put rubber glue along this whole outside edge of this and some on these tabs. And we'll put our plastic trim ring back on there and then clamp this all down so that will hold all that anyway. Where the other baskets, I have a plastic ring that goes around here and we'll clamp that down. And that works on most 12-inch baskets. It does not work on this one. I'd have to modify it, and I don't feel like modifying my trim piece for this style of basket when it fits all the other ones perfect. So. Well, now it's time to attach the coil. We're going to pre-activate it so it doesn't fall down in there. We're only going to put the glue where our tape is not. We're going to tack it down and let it sit for a few minutes, and then we will come back and try not to get any on the paper, that way you can get that shim back out of there. So I usually dab it onto the cone and then try to kind of slide it down so it attaches to the coil. Right back on top of where we were. Put an extra one in there. hard to see in the camera, but there's just 3 little tabs that I have in there, and that will hold the cone in place while we pull the tape, and then we can go around it a couple times. All right, now we're gonna carefully feed our leads through our little holes here and down to the cone as much as we can. You can see that. We want to be able to get glue underneath there so we don't have metal to the paper. Otherwise it might hear that. So we're going to take a tweezers and pull our tape off. I wouldn't suggest take the shim out yet. And leave it in there while we glue it. And spray some activator. And we're gonna go around here. Here I'm just breaking the shim away from the former. There. Get that out of there. Letting that dry. Come back, put another bead across here. We'll start to glue these down. About done. Put another quick bead. Wipe that off. Fan's blowing it around. Okay. There's no glue in there. Now we're going to let that sit for about 20 minutes. And then we'll come back and we'll put our small cap on there with our rubber glue. We'll snip them out where we need to with these. And then should be it. Glue our outer ring on. We'll do a test on it first, and then we'll put the large beauty dust cap, I call it, onto the dust cap. So we're gonna put that in there. This doesn't need to be pretty because we're not gonna see it when we're done anyway. Take my paint marker. I'm gonna mark where those are. I take my snipper, which is a hole punch. I hole punch them out. We want to stay away from that. We don't want the hole punches to go flying in there. So test fit it again. Should work. Oh. Okay, get a piece of 220 sandpaper, and we're going to sand the back edges of it. We want it to stick good. So. And it uses a lot of poly cones and poly dust caps. This is pretty essential. Gotta have something to stick to. On there. Take our 1/2-inch tape. Put one there. Gloves ain't the best thing for this, but put one there. Squeeze it together. We got a handle. Take our rubber glue. Put a bead around this flanged edge. This is one that you want to make sure the glue is all seeping out. Sometimes I'll take my thing and press against the cone. Make sure there's glue in there. Then I take a piece of electrical tape, put that on top. That, and then get a piece of, or get a paint can. I'll grab that on the other end over here. Just a paint can, because I got usually plenty of paint cans laying around. And just weigh it down. it sit for quite a while. The rubber glue takes a lot longer to dry than CA glue. We'll be back probably around an hour or so. Alright, it's been about 6 hours later. I went and did some other stuff. I'm going to pull all this off of here. Pull the tape off. So there's a little glue. Kind of get that off there. Okay. We just inspect it and make sure there's no holes anywhere. Okay, now we're going to go and solder our leads onto here. We're going to shorten them up a little bit, but we always want to make sure that there is enough play in the leads for full extrusion in and out. And my soldering iron's in the other room, so I'm going to take the sub in there and do that, and I'll bring it back and we'll go from there. Okay, we have soldered our leads on there. Give them plenty of room for the excursion, and they don't tap anything or bounce and hit the cone. That back on there. Now we're going to do the beauty dust cap, is what I call it. You can buy a dust cap that fits in that ridge, that dust cap little line there, but I don't have any, and I have these. I have quite a few of these, so this is what I want to use. And I'm using them kind of for the certain weight that they are. So we're going to go through a mark where we want the cap to be centered at. Need a little gap between there, between the dust cap and the tape. So there will be a little margin for moving it around. Okay. Then we're going to sand the back edges all the way to the edge. Get out of rubber glue. And this you're going to want to be careful putting glue around it. Don't want to get too much on it, and then when you push it down, it squishes out everywhere. And if you do get some squish out, just leave it, let it dry. It'll come. You can come back and clean it up once it's dry. When it's wet, it's just going to string everywhere. Got my tape, which few of these off. Then it'll get stuck to our cone. Okay, now we're gonna go find something that is almost as big as this dust cap, set it on there, set some weights on there, we're gonna let it sit for a while. Which I'm gonna use an old speaker, which is almost the same size. I wanna make sure that edge is down. I'll put that on there. Make sure it's centered. Push. Get our paint can, which will stick. It's the magnet. There. We'll let it sit. We'll put the fan on it. And this, the longer you let it sit is the better, especially before you do any testing, or I wouldn't say testing, but you play any test tones through it to maybe break it in, or the longer you let it sit, the better, around 6 to 12 hours. That way you don't have any types of rattles. All right. Then we'll put the trim ring on, which is pretty simple, and we're done.